Hello, friends, and welcome back to Book Banter. I am Tanya E. Williams, literary historical fiction author, and today we are chatting with debut historical fiction author Sophia Alexander. Sophia writes character-driven historical novels that grip readers' emotions and surprise them with unexpected twists. A native of the South Carolina Lowcountry and a graduate of the College of Charleston, she now lives in Savannah, Georgia, with her husband. Sophia enjoys visiting the beach late in the evenings and is afflicted with bouts of genealogy obsession, which is how she ran across some of the characters that inspired the Silk trilogy. Hopefully, you'll be glad they did. Sophia's debut novel, Silk, Caroline's Story, released on June 30th, 2021, and is being very well received by readers. So please, help me welcome Sophia to Book Banter. Hello!
Hi.
So nice to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
I am sure the past month for you has been a whirlwind of activity. Have you had the chance to breathe and take it all in yet?
Not really. I'm planning to take a breather soon, though. My family's taking a little beach vacation to Daytona, and I'd like to say I'd be putting all this, aside during that time, but I tend to be a little obsessed, or so my family tells me. But hopefully, the ocean will help clear my head.
Oh, time at the ocean is always a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Always a good idea. We've got Stacy. Hi, Stacy. She's saying hello and welcome, Sophia. So let's dig in because Silk has been out for less than a month, and I'm sure it's doing really well. The cover is beautiful. If you can see over Sophia's shoulder there, the green, it's a beautiful cover. It's so simple, but it's got so much depth. I love it. It's such a good job.
Thank you.
So can you tell us about the essence of Silk? What is the story about in your words?
Well, Silk is about a woman named Caroline who has to choose between two men. But there's a young sociopath named Jesse who's not about to let that happen, at least not if Caroline chooses the good-natured, good-looking sharecropper that Jesse has her heart set on. But the town doctor is the obvious choice for Caroline. But then things get complicated as life does, and that's the main plot of the story. There's the main subplot has to do with Caroline's best friend Anne. They start working in a sewing factory together, but then their lives veer drastically, and one embraces a more traditional family life, and the other goes out into the modern world. And I think they help to balance each other out.
I agree. I think that's actually it was like almost like a dual storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And is that where Silk, the title comes from, is because of the sewing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the silk dresses.
The silk dresses. That's what
Especially, it's particular. Actually, I was referring to the chartreuse silk dresses that they made for their Christmas party.
Okay. Yes, I have a visual of them in my head, but I don't know if it's accurate. I read a book like I watch a movie and create the scenes. So
That's what you're supposed to do. It's
easier when the author makes it so vivid for me, I have to say. So I actually just finished reading Silk last week, and I have to tell you, it was like no book I've ever read before. And it was a challenge to put down, and yet I still couldn't figure out exactly why it was a challenge to put down, because I just kept turning pages, and I thought, wow. So Stacy's saying she already wants to read it. It sounds so good. So the first thing that I noticed was the way you navigated between character perspectives. So I'll be honest, it took me a few pages to sort it out, to figure out who was talking. But it was a very quick learning curve. And I think by 5 pages in, I was like, oh, I see what she's doing. So, and it really did, the character's point of view, whose head you're in when you're reading, just melded into the background, which was really cool, actually, considering how, excuse me, you didn't change the typical way, which is like one chapter is character A
Mhm.
and the second chapter's character B. It was
Mhm.
all melded in within each chapter. So I'm wondering, when you set about to write Silk, was that style of formatting character points of view something you planned on, or was it something that just morphed out of the writing process?
That is a very tactful way of saying that I do a lot of head hopping in my writing. I'm glad it didn't bother you for too long. It 'Cause it is really frowned on by much of the writing community, but I find it refreshing. I love when authors thrust us right into a completely different perspective in the middle of a scene, and it used to be more common to write that way, and I think it helps with empathy building to kind of jump between characters and constantly be provoked to consider what each person is thinking and why they're thinking it, and but um, and recently I was reading the amazing Margaret George, her Mary Queen of Scots, and she was head hopping. You know, she head hops with the best of us. She even minor characters. You know, you'll be in their head all of a sudden,
Really?
and I love it. I think that's a wonderful way to write. But as for whether I planned it that way, not really. I My formal education is in science, and so even though I've always been a voracious reader, and I you know attend writing groups and do what I can to learn about writing, I tend to go with my gut a little more than maybe people that have been trained in the conventions. So, but that said, I have shifted gears for my next series after this, and maybe it had to do with some of the head hopping comments. But I was inspired by Suzanne Collins' Hunger Games, and she went with the first person point of view, present tense, and it was so real and intense. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this, even though I'm writing historical fiction. My next series is from that is very real and tangible and gripping, hopefully, and and uh, so uh, so I do use that now, and I love first person, but I miss the head hopping.
Interesting. Very interesting. Because that's my preference, is to write in first person.
Oh,
It,
really? Yeah.
yeah, it's
Okay.
for me, it's the easiest because
Yeah.
I sit down at my desk and I put on the character, like I put on a coat,
Right. You
and
are
then
that person in that moment. Yeah.
I see the world
Hmm.
through their perspective and navigate it. And that's why I think it's the easiest for me. So,
I've I've even seen people do that and still head hop.
really?
Yeah, yeah. Usually, I mean, I think they might switch chapters, but and it'll say at the top they might put the name
Oh,
of the person,
yeah. I've done that.
but that's pretty amazing.
I do that. I like different perspectives. Stacey's saying
Mhm.
as well, she loves different perspectives.
Mhm.
And I think that's how you kind of get the best of all worlds. You kind of wrap a story in a different point of view to look at a challenging situation. How did
Mhm.
person A handle it versus how did person B handle it? So
Mhm.
I think there's value in that. I mean, dual timelines and dual perspectives is huge in historical fiction, especially right now.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Fiona Davis can't be wrong. She's doing quite well. So,
Mhm.
Now, this novel is Caroline's story, and she deals with the social norms of the era, kind of like what you're talking about with Anna, who chooses to work and have a less typical lifestyle. Um, and so Caroline really looks at what was expected of women, but there are also a few threads throughout the story that were quite intriguing, and it kept me guessing as I read. There is a romance, and I'll be honest, I am not a romance reader. Um, but what I loved about Silk was that the romance was not typical, it was not cookie cutter. And I was quite intrigued to see where the novel written about realities of life that often don't make the page usually. So there were some scenes that stuck out to me that just typically, at least from what I've read, and maybe it's just a limited reading experience on my end, but there were things that I hadn't seen typically in historical fiction. And I'm wondering if that was an intentional approach in writing the novel, to sort of pick out those tidbits that are a little bit less common.
I have to admit, it really wasn't specifically planned. I am inspired by I was inspired by my genealogy to write this story, and I've changed so many names, and it's totally fictional, but I do have a Caroline in my family tree, and I wrote it in a sort of like connect the dots. I can, I've got death dates and birth dates and anecdotes and just little records, but then I put in my own way off the grid, like and totally fictional major characters. So this is a fictional story, very fictional story, but but let's see. But you do incorporate social issues of the day, and I use those to explain what Caroline, why Caroline went from point A to point B. And I use them to add drama, and and on that note, much of my writing is cathartic. It's and I never went through what Caroline went through exactly, but I think a lot of readers can identify with the heartbreak, with the, with and you can draw analogies to your dreams or the stories you write, with even situations are simplified and changed and amplified, but that's
well, I love that you use the genealogy. I think that I don't think that there is actually a fictional story out there that isn't inspired by some kind of truth. That is sort of my belief in fiction, that it has to come from somewhere, and we're not really great as humans as far as like being innovative. So we often end up repeating things, fashion and stories and things like that. They all have a different twist to them, but they still all come from truth. So I think,
and the human condition.
yes, that's the most incredible aspect of historical fiction for me, is that the humans don't change that much, but the experiences that they go through don't change that much. The setting and the place and the way that they may perceive them, those are the opportunities to examine them from different perspectives. I love that about historical. It's so cool. And it, that's just but I'm a history geek, so
right. Well, me too. And but I do think of the people then maybe as a bit hardier than us, and they had higher hormone levels and higher IQs. Even research has shown that, and so
what's shorter lives. So
yeah, a lot of them did, but they also, they selected for the most durable and intelligent people, and I'm not sure we're doing our species a lot of favors. But I don't know. There's the whole process of evolution, but I don't know.
It goes both directions.
I envision. So my historical men, they're maybe a little too much like the men on the historical romance covers that are all on steroids and and they're reading Plato,
I definitely picked up on that. And like I said, I don't read a lot of romance, so. But you also touched on some pretty challenging topics. You touched on plantation life and what you so eloquently phrased as dark-skinned people. And I thought it was done in such a subtle manner, and that's a challenge in itself. Of course, I'm not from the South, so I don't have the same frame of reference or anything for societal situations then and now. Did you feel tugged in one direction or another when it came to that particular part of the story?
Well, yes, I was scared of it. The racial issues are a hot button topic here in the South. It wasn't something I was eager to tackle because it's painful, and so there's people have been through such brutality, and on one level to even bring it in, when Caroline's dealing with her issues and they seem so intense to me, and then to contrast them with what with what other people were going through, I don't know, it was difficult. So my first draft of Silk didn't really bring those issues in at all. I never and but then I realized I'd been kind of negligent, because you can't, depict a society without, you have to include the people that are there, and representation matters, and and acknowledging diversity makes a book more authentic. And and also, when I was a little girl, I saw Robin Hood, by the Disney Robin Hood, and there was a little girl in the film. She had maybe one line, but I remembered her as a major character in this movie. And then when I watched it with my children, I was shocked that she had such a minor role, but her presence in that movie meant so much to me. I guess I felt represented, and I would never want to alienate anyone because I didn't include them where they absolutely belong.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really well said, because it's as authors, we really do walk a fine line. Like, whose story is it to tell? And I think own voices are coming up so strong, and I think there's going to be a lot of great literature coming from different groups of people and different authors with backgrounds that do need to be highlighted and discussed. And I think that may be our way through. Like, we have to find a way to sort of reconcile. It's so hard. It's such a hard topic, and I feel deeply for anybody of any, race, religion, anything that is outside of what somebody has labeled the norm, whatever that means. I don't think there is a norm. Who has been at the hands of something untoward. And I mean, I think fiction is our way through. Maybe we can, learn from one another and hopefully, expand the conversation.
Yeah.
Conversation needs to be had. It's a difficult one for sure, but we need to have it. We need to have it. So speaking of difficult conversations, there's a character in Silk that you describe as a young sociopath. And I'm wondering, what was it like to get inside Jessie's head and write from her experience?
I loved writing Jessie. She is by far the most fun to write. She's just so, in my worldview, a good person is always second guessing themselves, and they're trying not to make mistakes, and they're just kind of hesitant. But sociopaths, including many charismatic leaders, aren't necessarily burdened by that. By their conscience that way. And I once heard Meryl Streep discuss how exhilarating it was to play this sort of role. She was the ambitious, ruthless mother of a presidential nominee and the Manchurian Candidate, and she. But I completely get what she was saying now, because she explained that she's nothing like that woman. She is plagued by uncertainties in her real life, but and and I agree. Jessie is plagued by her own angst and her she's neurotic. She has her issues, but it was fascinating to write this girl who was so certain of what she wants, and she is only considering anyone else's feelings in order to get what she wants.
Misguided at best, but
what's that?
She's misguided at best.
She's a little crazy.
But entertaining, like very entertaining. You know what's interesting is I've written one novel with a character who is, she's probably sociopathic. And it is very, it's a different place to write from, but it's a different feel as you're writing it, but yet it's exhilarating as well. It's almost a little bit freeing. So I understand what you're saying, that you enjoyed writing that. Like I personally enjoy writing cheeky characters, and
What characters? Cheeky. What's that? Cheeky. Yes. Exactly.
So
when I wrote her, and I was so shocked at the fury people had at Jessie. I mean, I know she's bad, but they were so furious, and it was beyond. I was like, it was like they were real. Like, this is real to these readers, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I went back and I tried to make her more sympathetic, but I don't think it worked. They hate her.
She is who she is, and she's proud to be who she is. I think there's, even if it's misguided, a character owning who they are is important for a story. I have to tell you that it's pretty common that writers will write something, and then and then readers will read it and really take hold of ownership of it. And I actually love that dynamic, because once you've written a book and you send it out into the world, it really is no longer your own book. It is colored by every single reader's perceptions and experiences and life that they've lived when they read it. So it's a different book for each individual reader. And I think that's pretty fascinating. So, and if you've gotten a really strong emotion, it means you've done something right.
Right.
It's not always easy to read in a review, but it means you've got something right. When Stacy says that now she wants to meet Jessie, when she says that my character traumatized her. Sorry about that. She was necessary, though. So Caroline's story, thankfully, is the first in a trilogy. This is exciting. So the story will continue with some of the characters in the setting, I'm guessing?
Yes. The 3 generations of Caroline's family form the core protagonist of the Silk Trilogy. And it's all set in the same time and place, or well, not the same time, but consecutively.
Time goes on,
And but Jessie remains the core antagonist throughout.
Okay.
So every story introduces new love stories and people and situations, but and Silk set at the turn of the century. Tapestry opens during the Great War and runs through the Roaring 20s. And then Homespun is goes into the 40s, so ending just before the Second World War. So
I'm so excited.
so it's a broad kind of saga kind of thing. But I don't want to say too much more, because I don't want to leak spoilers for those who haven't read Silk. But I will say that the third novel has a new, completely different sort of antagonist, and I had a lot of fun pitting him against Jessie. So,
cool. Interesting. So it's okay. So I love that it's going to span years, but it's going to stay in
Mhm,
the same region, set in the same
mhm,
region, around the
mhm.
same family. That's very cool. Um, and so what's interesting is so I know very little about the Low Country. I've traveled to, south to California, but that really, I'm thinking wine country might not be the same as Low Country. So you made the region come to life in a way that felt very natural, and the setting seemed to have a sense of grace to it. And I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed that. And my favorite thing is when a setting becomes a character. It's my absolute favorite thing.
Aw.
So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the region, because I literally know nothing about it, although I'm coming to visit you. So
Good, good.
once
That
our
would be
borders
great.
open.
And you, yeah. Well, at its most basic level, the Low Country is the area of South Carolina that used to be covered by oceans. And so if you go about 100 miles inland, there's the Sand Hills and Fall Line where the dry land started back then. But where we live, there's fossils of sea creatures and shells everywhere, so that's like, I mean, not all over the ground, but you find
Cool.
them like all in the, when you're digging, what are shells doing here? That's what, because it was
Really?
once ocean. So the land tends to be really flat. It's an agricultural area that had a lot of slave plantations. There's It's a subtropical climate. There's an associated Southern charm, cuisine, and culture. And if you want to be technical about it, you'll see various definitions of what the Low Country includes. Usually Beaufort and the Sea Islands, and sometimes they don't even include downtown Charleston. But I include like everything that was, on the eastern coast of South Carolina, pretty much in my own personal definition of it. So if you visit, and you were talking about the charm. My best friend loves to go to little towns and find the secret, or find the little hidden charms, But
Mhm.
me, I went to college at Charleston because it was beautiful. I live in Savannah. I like
You.
I like the overt, Southern charm of, you go on the trolley tour or the
Yeah.
carriage tour, and you visit the historic sites. So those are what I would recommend. I mean, you might find some of that Southern charm in the small towns, and I certainly can find little pockets of it, but it would be more challenging.
Interesting. So it's more of a sort of a commercialized tourist type of charm.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly I have family members that, it's kind of imbue that charm, I think, but then I have a lot that do not. So
But there's still like front porch sitting and
well, my so a lot of that's lost. I mean, um, my grandparents sat out on the front porch, and that was very much the way they were when I was little, But then by the time I grew up, they had enclosed the porch and put in air conditioning, and and they had changed. They changed with the times, and that's and it's things are kind of all
technology.
that's falling by the wayside, So if you go to the small towns, you may just be around a lot of trailers and it's
Oh,
there are nice places, there are, but it would just be a little more work to find.
interesting. Now my little vision of has been is altered a little bit. My eyes have
I'm
been opened
sorry.
to it. No, that's okay. It's better to go in with your eyes wide open.
But a lot of that, this is the reality of the area. It's changed so much, but the way I wrote it, I think is sort of a lot of the way it was. I even recently I was going through some old wills and things, and
Oh, wow.
and I was shocked. Like this was early 1800s, but one of but this I think he was a brother of an ancestor, but he had sheep and spinning wheels. And I'm just like, sheep? And
Wow.
here, what? I
That's
don't
not
think,
something you picture in
yeah,
life.
yeah, he didn't have slaves, but he had sheep and spinning wheels and all this, it sounded so, not the way I envisioned,
No,
you know, the area, but things change.
they do. They do. And, media and everything like that definitely has an impact on how we think things
Hmm.
are. So,
Hmm.
that's part of it too, right?
Well, I
And
hope I don't mislead anyone into thinking they come, but there are, if you go into, if you go visit the historic sites and and all that, and kind of, the things that are designed for the tourist, you'll definitely see a lot of that.
yeah.
And then you don't forget to go to the parks and the beaches, or,
Oh,
to get the
yeah,
natural beauty of the area, because that still
absolutely.
is, still something you shouldn't miss.
Absolutely. I am drawn by the ocean, so I think I'm
Yeah.
solar powered. So, you know. um, so as a reader, I do not enjoy info dumps. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, an info dump is when an author feels compelled to fill their novel with all, and I do mean all, the research they learned about the time period, a region, etc. As an author, I'm an avid researcher, and I love to share what I've learned with others. So there is a fine balance between what you learn and what you put into a novel. One of the most intriguing aspects of Silk was how you wove the historical tidbits into the story without hitting the reader over the head with the history. I became very aware of where I was in time and place, given the fence post of brief mentions of world events that were scattered throughout the story. I thought that was actually quite brilliant. Was that intentional, or was there a lot of tweaking that had to go in to find the right balance for that?
Oh, it was very intentional, and you do it quite well yourself. Uh, I loved in all that was how you would have these little mentions of different historic events, the Spanish flu and
Yeah.
the journal entries, they were just it was really neat to, and I think those things help orient you in the time and place, and are so important. But like I said, I started writing Silk as it was very insular, and it was just genealogy inspired, and I was not thinking big world stuff. So my first manuscripts do not have these world events in them at all. In fact, I'll admit something I was so embarrassed to realize is that the beginning of Tapestry opens when we are in the middle of World War One, and I didn't even mention World War One in the book at all. It is there now, but I mean, if someone had asked me, what's going on in the world, right? But it didn't seem to pertain to the story I was telling. It wasn't what was in my imagination. It wasn't. Uh, but I was horrified when I what was I thinking? But
Well, you're
I personally was
focused on the
that
story, right? Like, because your brain can only go in so many places at once. So, you know,
right. So that was embarrassing, but I personally read historical fiction partly to learn, about the local. But I do need to be oriented in the world events and the time, and I think readers that know anything about the time would feel a little irritated if you neglected to mention really big things like World War One or the Spanish flu.
it's funny. Stacey says that she learns so much from historical tidbits in books, and I
Mhm.
think that is true of all of us. Like, who hasn't read something and gone, "Wait, is that real? Or did that really
Mhm.
happen?" And I didn't know about it. And then, like, my favorite part of historical novels is actually the author's note at the back.
Mhm. Oh,
My
well,
favorite part, because then I get
yeah,
to know
I
where you're
really
going
do
with.
like this.
But
I love that too. I didn't put one in in silk, but I did. It was a very systematic and formal way of going through it. I have this. Let's see, I found this monster tomb here.
Oh, I have the same one.
Do you?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, with
It's right there. You can
oh
just
my
see
gosh. Yeah, it's got the
blood.
articles. Well, let me see. I have to go backwards here.
I know.
But it's got the yeah, so I just went through all the years of silk and I highlighted all, anything that seemed really important, and then I included just a fraction of those and just kind of went through and peppered the story to try to so it was like embroidery. You just you have your main cloth that's already done, and then I just went and embellished with historical tidbits to make it more real.
Really done well, because I think it's a great way to do it, because if you're focused really just on the story and then you can go in and weave those things in, I think that's a great way to do it, because otherwise it's like rabbit hole to rabbit hole to rabbit hole. And, 3 years later, you know a lot about things that are going to make one sentence mention in your book. So I actually think that's a really good approach. So
oh, thank you. Yeah, I knew. I mean, I had been researching my family since I was 12, and I've been to so many libraries and museums, and looking at census records and archives, wills, land records. And right before I wrote Silk, I had read this. Let's see. I had read this this is just a reprinted memoir of. Let's see.
I know the camera's backwards.
I have the hardest time getting it on the screen.
I struggle with it every time I go to move my hair and it's the wrong side. It's the camera.
But that was a local man that he described the wedding dinner that like a similar wedding dinner. He was an educator, so he talked about the schooling, and so I got information about that. And then I had run across this. Let's see if I can do better. Yeah, it was. This is by Bessie Swan Britton, and she was my fictional little girl Emma.
Yes,
is Bessie really?
Oh my
gosh. And she was the one who, I guess in a way, she inspired this whole thing, because she talks about Caroline being at a Christmas party with her best friend. And I was just and she was pretty with blonde curls, and she liked to read, and I was like, why did she date a sharecropper? What happened? And so that just kind of got the wheels turning.
I love the nuggets that just it literally takes a grain of sand, and then all of a sudden a story evolves. That's the most fun part of the entire writing process, is that little nugget that all of a sudden expands, and you're like, wow, I have an entire story. I have a cast of characters. It's fabulous. I love it. Well, I have to say, well done to you on releasing such a captivating debut novel. Can you tell? So Tapestry's coming up next. How long do we have to wait for that? Can we pre-order already? Or
pre-order? It's the ebook is already up for pre-order, and I am just kind of going through tweaking right now. So that's coming out in April.
Okay. So when this is all wrapped up, when our recording's all wrapped up and whatnot, I'll add links for everybody so that you can find Sophia's books in the links. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
It's really fun getting to know more about you and about Silk and the writing process. And I will put links in on Facebook and YouTube for everybody, but you can find Silk, Carolyn's Story, at your favorite online retailer. And don't forget to follow Sophia on Instagram. I'll just quickly put that up again. Hang on one sec. There it is. And also, if you want to read the first couple of chapters of Silk, I believe it is, you can sign up as well for Sophia's newsletter. and get a little sampling of what she calls head hopping and I call creative. So I'll just see if there's any other comments. Stacy says, this was great. Adding your books to my want to read list. So excellent.
Hope you enjoy them.
I'm betting Stacy will. I know what Stacy is. So thanks again for joining us. And thanks for watching, everybody. And be sure to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. And we will see you soon. And I'm wishing everybody a wonderfully bookish day. Bye.